So 6 years ago, one of the first videos we did was a review of my tool tank. It's a good old truck. It's been 6 years since I brought you up to speed on, why I run this, how I came across this truck, and what I have done to it or not done to it over the last 6 years. I've done a lot of different kinds of work, from light to heavy, from concrete to finish, from steel fabrication to framing houses. And the trucks that I've driven have reflected those different types of work. And maybe that's the way it is for you. I don't know what kind of work you do, and I don't know what you're driving. But as I describe what it is that I drive now, which I think is pretty much the ultimate truck for what I do now, or what I've been doing for the last 20 years, you might just think about what it is about your ride that either works or doesn't work for the work you're either doing or want to do. So, let me show you what's been going on with this old girl for the last 6 years. The first thing I've got to point out is I've got a different logo. And that's because YouTube has expanded until it kind of dominates my life. My contractor's license is on inactive status right now, and so the law in Oregon is I can't advertise. But besides that, this is what's going on in my life, and will be until they bury me. And so the old Wadco Construction logo is gone. The Essential Craftsman logo is on here, but I might redo it so it's a little heavier. The lines are a little light on the side of this truck, right? Part of this tour, you can go to the other video if you want to see this truck, but part of this tour is going to be to emphasize the things I didn't even touch on previously, or that have happened or been done to this truck, in the interim. The first is, I'm terrible about maintenance. I'm getting a little better, and so there was some deferred maintenance on this truck that's had to have been taken care of in the last 2 years. The first one of those things was I tore the rear end out of my own truck when I was working on the spec house. It was operator error. It was the third rear end that this truck has had, and so I may have been making the same mistake for years. One of the reasons that I like four-wheel drive is because this truck is heavy. It's like 13,000 pounds sitting here right now. And when I'm parking on a hill, when it's steep, I don't trust the emergency brake, which, by the way, is marginal at best on these F-350s. And so I would not just put it in low gear, but I would put it in low range, low gear, and then on a steep hill, I would shut off the motor, and just as the RPMs stopped and the motor was stopped, I would let the clutch out so the drivetrain was loaded up, so it wouldn't creep back. Well, it turns out that was shocking the pinion gear on the back of this truck, and it tore it apart twice before I figured out that I was just being dumb in the way I was treating my truck. I don't do that anymore, and I expect to run this rear end to the end of its days. So the second thing that I had to have done was the motor began to leak quite a bit of oil on the spec house. I started leaving oil spots on that beautiful driveway that Dustin had poured. So I took this to a local mechanic that I really, really like, Rocky's Automotive. He's a good guy with a good shop and good employees and good tools. And he said, yep, where the dipstick goes in has loosened up, and it's spewing oil out of there and in other places too. And as it turns out, we either do an aftermarket cheesy fix to fix that, or we pull the oil pan, replace the gaskets, put some new injectors in, and just generally, stop the hemorrhage. So I said, do that. Turned out, because of a cross member in the front of this thing, they had to pull the engine to replace the oil pan and the oil pan gasket. And so they did that. It is tight as a drum, and I don't leave a trail of oil now for finding my way back home in case I've forgotten during a long day. Oh yeah, one more major thing that was done before the spec house started was I had the transmission rebuilt. I had done a trade with Amco Transmission here in town, Kyle Reber, and it was time to follow up on that trade. I was losing the synchros in second, and it was just getting tired. So he went through the transmission. We then had a rear end put in. We've had the front end, the motor opened up and checked out, and all of that's good. So the drivetrain now is strong. I think I had new, he did brakes. Kyle did a clutch when he was in there. The suspension has been tightened up, so my running gear is good for the long haul. I've gone through one set of tires since that last initial review, and so with a set of tires on this, I think it's going to be, ready to rock for quite a while. Kind of rationalizing the cost of this deferred maintenance and keeping this good old truck running is easy. When I go down to the Ford dealer and see how many tens of thousands of dollars, you know, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 it would cost me to get the same chassis, to put the same flatbed on there. It would be so much money. I am happy to keep this old girl running just as long as I can. When I had initially had this truck sort of restructured, right? It had been a logging vehicle. I think I told you that it had been thrashed, but had low miles. So when I was doing the paint and cleaning it up and scraping out the inside, I had to get everything reupholstered. And there's one upholstery hack in there that I'm going to show you that might be useful for some of you guys who run a little construction business, whether you're driving a van or a pickup. Check this out. So I hate paperwork. I will die of 1,000 paper cuts. And so when I had these seats reupholstered and a headliner and everything, you know, cleaned up, I thought, why not have the upholsterer put some slots in here for a little filing system for contracts and, you know, building permit inspection cards and receipts. And it was a great idea that I have failed utterly to utilize anywhere near its potential, but at least it makes people think that I'm paying attention to the details of my contracting business. So when I showed you the crane last time, one mistake that I made was identifying this little unit that I used to install and make the controller as an LB. I'm told by you all that this is a C condulet. Great, it works all right. This is my shorter and more profoundly abused control whip. I have a new one up there that Ben made. These little switches go bad sometimes. I've got to replace one that controls the actual winch in my good whip. I just have this until I get that fixed. So C condulet. Some of the details around this are that the electric over hydraulic pump is right inside of here. The battery that it runs off of is right there. The plug-in that it connects to is in here, and there's an assortment of solenoids and switches back behind there to facilitate the electric controls and the control to the pump. So this hydraulic cylinder is garden variety. The plumbing that goes into it is garden variety, runs off of this pump like I mentioned. This is not like an excavator or a log loader with a Rotec bearing, so you can go around and around. So I have to keep track of how many times and how far this thing has rotated so I don't twist off or damage this hydraulic line. That's not handy. But I'll tell you what, a Rotec bearing would cost thousands of dollars. Instead, George used the hub off of the rear axle of a Chevy 1-ton truck. Let me show you what this looks like inside of here. And it's plenty strong, it's tied down in a very bulletproof way, and it's been able to deal with all of the loads I've put on it. Now that doesn't mean that I couldn't use this to the point of failure, but what it means is if you use your head when you use a machine like this, anybody can build one. And anybody who does heavy, you know, medium heavy construction work by themselves is darn glad to have something like this on the back of a truck. So I've got those bolts out. This is just a cover. It's also an illusion. It makes everything look much sturdier than it actually is. You see this electric winch in here? Cy helped me do the machine work. I had connected the sprocket that I put on that ATV winch with the sprocket that he machined onto the hub, thinking I would have a mechanical swing. But it was just way too fast. I mean, it was almost a pitching machine, right? It would really swing. So I just disconnected it, and I was going to put a hydraulic little orbital motor in there to run off the same hydraulic pump and then restrict the flow to slow it way down, but just wasn't worth it. You know, diminishing returns. I was getting my work done without it. There was not time to interrupt. But what you've got here is a Chevy rear end hub. This is a rear wheel off of a Chevy 1-ton. The axle, which we reinforced with some gussets of, looks like probably 6x2 quarter wall rec tube onto a big piece of plate, which is bolted down really hard to a matching piece of plate that is welded into the bed of the truck, welded into the frame. It's all connected to this whole concrete stake bin assembly and so far I just have not been able to tear it off. You've probably watched me build this building behind me. It's for my daughter and her family. Been having a fine time. And this was the first job that I used my little Kubota excavator on. It came off of the truck, brand new, drove it down the driveway, and started the excavation. I knew I was going to be hauling that in my dump trailer, which I've pulled around behind this truck for a long time. On this hitch, this is a hitch that was built by a friend of mine. It's a great design so that the weight of the trailer keeps the hitch from clattering about, and it's an adjustable height. It's just handy, and I've used it for probably 15 years. Well, as I was thinking about hauling a new excavator and a dump trailer, which would bring my truck right up to capacity or a little beyond, I thought I was going to do a couple test runs. As I was hauling the trailer from here over to the place that I'm dumping the fill, I hauled some heavy loads and weighed them on the way out. And I had a particularly heavy load that was probably 10,000 pounds of net weight, a 14,000 pound gross load behind my truck. I had it parked right here. And as I was easing out the driveway, I thought, oh, I got to go back and check my hitch one more time. And I came back and I looked at it, and it was latched, and the lights and the safety chains, the breakaway. Okay, I got in the truck and I pulled the truck out into the street and thought, no, wait, I had that little premonition, that still small voice said, go back and look at that hitch again. I went back thinking, what? Really? I'd looked, and I walked around to this side and I looked, and there's a little crack peeping out from the receiver. Just a little bit. And I pulled the pin and I pulled it out, and look what I saw. My hitch was failing. It was tearing off. This was months ago. Most of that brake was new. A little bit of it was old. That hitch was in the process of coming loose with a 14,000 pound net load trailer loose on the end of my safety chains, maybe loose on the highway. It was a near miss. I've had about 3 of those in my life when a voice, nearly audible, says, wait, or stop, or slow down, or fix that. This was the latest. So what I did was went over and got a truly heavy-duty hitch rated for 17,000 pounds max towing weight. And I put it in there, and I don't even look back. I can't imagine a better work truck. It's got the power, it's got the reliability, it's got the low gearing, it'll hold the weight, it'll pull the trailers. It does everything and carries everything that I need to do all the things that I need to do, and I am just grateful to have it. I think probably the last job it's going to do for me will be to serve, if Brian Reynolds still has a big excavator, as a pretty good coffin. Thanks for watching. Keep up the good work.